while I was working at 662, I heard something over the Nextels that we all carried for security. And what I heard was, got him.
These radios that we keep talking about, the Nextel telephones, two-way radios, they had pretty much just come into play. Because originally all we had were the, regular radios, just the radio itself. And probably closer to around the time of us coming out to Las Vegas, around the time frame of Pac being killed, I would say that those Nextel phone radios had just come into play for right-way security. There was only, it's a guess, there was probably only 4 or 5 of them. Okay, but it was enough to go around to the people that mattered that should have had them.
Nextel sold a push-to-talk feature, which was essentially a walkie-talkie over a cell phone line. With it, conversations could be transmitted via speakerphone. This was how Moore heard the conversation on Wright's cell phone. But was this a random broadcast meant for a wider audience, with Moore and Wright only passive listeners? That's possible now. But what about in 1996? We asked the Sprint Nextel Corporation to comment on the ability to communicate with a group on the push-to-talk feature.
My name is Jack Flans. I'm a communications manager for Sprint Nextel. Group talk for the push-to-talk product was not available in 1996 as it is now.
So if a Nextel radio broadcast had to be a point-to-point conversation, and Moore hears the message over Wright's Nextel, then only one conclusion remains. Someone with immediate knowledge of the kill called Wright directly.
Right before me and Mr. Wright got in the vehicle to go get to the hospital, someone else came on the radio and said, hey, don't say nothing over the radio.
That communication, however obtained, either through search warrant or otherwise, needs to be gathered, because how can you tell a conspiracy if you don't have the conspirators and you don't have the communication between the people that are actually running the conspiracy?
You've got to know a timeline of the individual who is your target. You've got to know where they're at, where they're going to be, who they're going to be surrounded by. And the second thing is, following that timeline, knowing when there is, you're going to have to plan according to that.
Mr. Wright and I were talking about what had happened, and I just clearly heard somebody say, don't say that over the radio. But the person who said it was not Homeboy Security, nor was it one of our security guards. It was, to me, it would be like a stranger. Someone, and the person that said that was Caucasian. I was never interviewed by any of the police agencies, the FBI, nor Las Vegas PD. And I found that to be a little strange, because for the last week, I was with Tupac, and I didn't get a single question from anyone about what I thought, what my theory was on what happened, nor about the Nextel phones, where I had heard the conversation that said, got him.
No interviews. This is my first any kind of interview.
It was the DA's office, but no any other federal agencies, no.
And when I look at all what's happened with Rampart, people that we had working for Death Row, where we had Los Angeles police officers working within the organization, Compton police officers working with inside the organization, that is where it failed. People had badges, people had careers, and that's exactly what they did.
Well, I was in the FBI for 27 and a half years, and at the time of my retirement in 1979, I was the senior special agent in charge of the FBI Los Angeles office. I developed information personally about just extensive corruption in the government, not only at the federal level, but all the way down to the city and state level across this country. I have information about corrupt judges, corrupt law enforcement, prosecutors, county officials, judges. It involves drugs, involves pornography, involves prostitution, it involves cults, pedophilia. The bottom line is to take over the country and the world.
For what, though?
Power, greed. This goes back over 200 years, back to 1776, with the establishment of an organization known as the Illuminati. Mm-hmm. And if your listeners don't know what the Illuminati is, they need to run down to the library and look it up and do some research, because And on May the 1st, 1776, a fellow named Adam Weishaupt, German, set forth 25 goals at the request of the Rothschild group that they needed to initiate in order to take over the world. We're talking about destroy the sovereignty of countries and destroy religions. And that's where it really started in modern day. And right today, believe it or not, and we have the documentation for this, we are probably 90%, their goals have probably been filled at the great rate of about 90%. And much to my surprise, my witnesses, my 19 new witnesses, including Alina Stokely, started calling me and saying, hey Ted, the FBI has interviewed me, they're trying to get me to recant. And I'm saying to myself, that isn't the responsibility of the FBI. The FBI is supposed to gather information, not destroy it. And that was my first clue that we had a serious problem in that case. And then I continued on, and I had a number of other cases that I handled privately. And in each instance, I noticed evidence was lost, destroyed, stolen. I noticed that there were strong indications of corruption. So I asked myself, now what's going on here? And over the years, I started gathering material until about 2 years ago. Up until about 2 years ago, I kept saying there's a loose-knit network operating in this country involving drugs, pedophilia, pornography, prostitution, corruption, etc., etc. 2 years ago, from my research, I'm convinced it's much more serious than that. It's more than a loose-knit network. It is a conspiracy. And you know how the news media comes after us, and we use the word C, conspiracy, that C word. Well, they can come after me all they like, because I guarantee you, right here and now, we do have a conspiracy, and I'm going to prove it to you here today.
John 8:32 will set you free. Read it. Figure it out.
So, we have the Illuminati. I couldn't believe the mamby-pamby, weak witnesses he brought forward, people that really had no direct knowledge of the drug operation. And that hearing was about bringing drugs into South Central LA by the CIA. I sent him a list of 16 names of people who had personal direct knowledge of drugs being brought into this country by the CIA. Never heard another word. None of those people ever appeared as witnesses.
Suppress the revolution, a premeditated scheme, introduce a drug called crack to us ghetto teens. Can't seem to focus, hopeless with violent thoughts. I wrote this, got these devils petrified, hiding from my hopeless focus.
I might also mention in Oklahoma City, I sent my report, copied my report back to the committee. I sent them a fax and said I had information which would be vital to your investigation of the Oklahoma City bombing. That report, by the way, is also available to you. I urge you to buy it. Never received a response. One of the driving forces behind this movement, the Illuminati, is the satanic cult movement in this country today. Now, when Alina gave me that signed statement, I said, what in the world is this all about? I don't know anything about Satanism. I'd heard the word, and that's about it. From the Bible, of course. So I began my little journey forward. And one of the matters that I developed information about was an individual I learned about with Alistair
Crowley, who died in 1947. Notice on this website, it's called the Order of the Evil Eye. We do not need to read all the particulars, but please notice at the bottom it says death to Christianity
as a guide. There, we talked about human sacrifice, okay? There it is, right in their book. I mean, I didn't invent that. That's there. Another aspect of their religion, if you want to call it religion. By the way, the federal government does recognize the satanic movement as a religion. Yet in Linda's case, the word Satanism was brought up by her husband's defense attorney. They sealed the records, have not made it available. And when she writes to her children and says, believe in God, she gets a letter back from these people saying, you can't mention God in your letter to your children. That's just an example, okay? You know, Mr. A, who has a booth next to mine, Mysterious Mr. A, he talks about subliminal messages. If you look at the logo of the Republican Party, you know the elephant with the 3 stars across the top? Well, if you look at it today compared to 2 years ago, the stars have been inverted. The point used to be at the top 2 years ago. Now, the point's at the bottom. Satanic, folks. I can't say for sure, but that's a subliminal message. Inverted stars. Agent in charge of the FBI Los Angeles office. I have information about corrupt judges, corrupt law enforcement.
And when I look at all what's happened with Rampart, people that we had working for death row, where we had Los Angeles police officers working within the organization, Compton police officers working with inside the organization, that is where it failed. People had badges, people had careers, and that's exactly what they did.